Now, I know it's probably just my perception, but it seems that we're always talking about changing the school curriculum, and now it's actually happening, well, at least in a year or two, driven supposedly by questionable performance of Australian kids in comparison to those elsewhere around the world. Following the Masters Review, our primary school curriculum will apparently move away from student-led learning to a more fundamental focus on facts, content and core knowledge. That's been the analysis that's been presented thus far of what will change in 2027. Initially in the subjects of science, history and geography, creative arts and PDHPE, which will all apparently have a greater focus on literacy. Educator Dr. David Roy from the University of Newcastle is with us to talk about the pros and cons of how we teach school kids. David, g'day.
Good morning, Paul, and everyone at home.
Good. This is a discussion, a gift that keeps on giving. And I just wonder, is there substantial change in this proposal?
There is some change that will make a difference. They have put more detail into what should be taught within the curriculum. It was very broad before, very open, and for some teachers that was a gift because it gave them freedom to try and use different stimuli. For other teachers, it was a struggle because they weren't always sure what to do. Giving more knowledge is not a bad thing. So there's not an issue with that. And it is a change in the sense that, for instance, the creative arts curriculum hasn't been touched for 18 years, and life has developed and changed since then.
Okay, I can hear our teachers groaning under the weight of more meetings and in-service days. Is this necessary change?
I think for some of it is. I think there needs to be a clarity and a consistency across the curriculum. There have been adaptations to mathematics for numeracy. There's been adaptations to English and to the science curriculum. And we need to make sure that all the knowledge areas are given equal validity across the curriculum so we have developed children with skills and abilities to cope with later life.
Is there a general feeling that the state-based syllabus and indeed the national curriculum, that they're too vague and ambiguous? Is that a general feeling among teachers?
Yeah, I think there is, but there's also been a bit of confusion because part of this is being sold as we're going to have more knowledge than skills. And kind of they go together, because why have a fact and then not have an ability to do anything with it? So you need to have both. So I worry that we are heading in another direction, similar to, say, America 20 years ago with the No Child Left Behind. And trust me, lots of children were left behind within that policy. And it was quite similar to some of the things they're suggesting here. So yeah, knowledge, we need to have knowledge, but the knowledge is there so you can do something.
I get that technology changes how we teach. Why is it that in 2024 we haven't established what the best way to teach is?
Because it's not a simple binary kind of answer. Teaching is done by people, and people are all different. What really concerns me is for some of the new areas coming in, particularly, say, with the teaching of literacy and phonetics, is that teachers are beginning to be given scripts by the departments that they literally have to read from as they teach it. And it's killing their creativity, their individuality. And I've spoken recently to several teachers in the public system who are saying they're looking to move to a different type of education system that gives them freedom to teach rather than be some kind of automated AI robot in the classroom. So we've got to have a clear curriculum, but there's a difference between what you teach and the pedagogy, how you teach.
Okay, let's get to the pedagogy in just a moment, because that discussion around traditional teacher-centred education versus the progressive education, which is more student-focused, is an important element.
Yeah.
But just firstly, are we talking essentially, is the headline out of this a return to the 3 Rs? In which case my grandfather would be very excited.
Well, I hope it's not, because the 3 Rs actually are R, W and A. So there's always been a problem with that phrasing for me. Talking about a return to the past, well, that's a really dangerous way of thinking, because our kids are living in a future that most of the adults don't have a real concept of. We want to have kids who can read. We want kids who can write and can do arithmetic. And if you listen to any teacher who actually cares about their job, they are doing those things. So there's a kind of a disingenuousness from some places to say this is not happening. It is happening. We just need to be clear that there are guidelines and that we're all playing from the same hymn book, which is why they're adapting the curriculum. And I don't have an issue with that.
It's been described by those involved as the biggest change to the New South Wales syllabus in a couple of decades. You're saying that's specifically around the humanities more than the broader teaching structure?
I mean, it's a tweak. It's not a radical change. We're not ripping up systems and doing something completely new. We're just adding and clarifying what is there already. And I think it's good. So I don't want to diminish it. I just think there's some hyperbole about it. And it's not something I would panic about. They're giving 2 years for teachers to adapt and implement this. Most teachers who've got a brain will be able to adapt it within a month.
I want to just, in terms of pedagogy now, let's create a spectrum. So we've got Sir with the cane at one end, my way or the highway, and at the other end, you've got the Montessori approach and the Waldorf style approach, where it's all about touchy-feely, no boundaries, no wall. No, and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way.
I vote for either.
I'm trying to, deliberately point in opposite directions. So is the answer somewhere in the middle there? Because this seems to be a shift to the more conservative side of that approach.
Explicit teaching has always gone on in the classroom. There has been sometimes an encouragement for people to let the kids explore and try out ideas. And that's great for some things. Kids need to experiment, but we do need to have actual knowledge given directly from the front. I lecture now in a university. I was a teacher. I give lectures. That's 1 hour of me just downloading information, giving deep deep learning direct to the students. But we want them to then apply that knowledge so they can demonstrate their understanding. It's like science classroom. If you just gave them the theory about how to titrate and how to measure, okay, that's great. But if you don't then actually have them doing inquiry where they do an experiment that is not really needed because it's in a textbook, they'll never develop the skill. So you wouldn't have science teachers to get rid of the lab because that's the application, the praxis, the doing of the actual knowledge. We need both together. Again, it's grey. Going to these binary extremes that so-called traditionalists, so-called progressives are saying is just creating a battle in education and doesn't help them and it doesn't help the kids or our society.
So how important are facts then? You've suggested that knowledge is an important thing, but Einstein was quizzed by a journalist once in an interview in the 1950s, asked his phone number, and he said, well, I'm not going to occupy brain space by remembering something that I can write down. And that applies more than ever now because we can simply Google a fact.
But if there's a knowledge of how to find the right fact, how to analyse and be able to say that this is a genuine fact, this is not just an opinion, that there is empirical evidence behind it. So you need knowledge and facts. I need to know the road rules before I drive my car. So I have that knowledge there, but I go beyond that. So I will always argue for a foundation of knowledge, but I will never say knowledge is the end goal. What we're wanting is the application of that. So we want skills, we want doing as well as learning. And just asking people to return knowledge by rote, that doesn't have any depth. We embed that knowledge when we actually do. And the teachers who have lively classrooms where information is given, but then information is applied, are the classrooms where the kids are engaged, because that's part of it. If you just give knowledge, you're going to have kids switching off. So part of the pedagogy, part of the teaching is to not just have the information, but have it in such a way that people want to hold on to it.
David, thanks so much. Great to chat. Dr. David Roy, who's an educator from the University of Newcastle, talking about proposed changes to the curriculum to be introduced from 2027. You might have some thoughts on that. 0487 99 12 33.